Thank you, Mina. Former Michigan Governor George Romney opened a campaign speech in this town 50 or so years ago by saying, "It's great to be here in Mount Clemens." His wife Lenore was sitting in the front row right over there where Phil Power is sitting, and she whispered to him, "George, it's pleasant." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. It's pleasant to be here in Mount Clemens." Let me see if I can, okay, over here. When I was, get this right here. Oh, this is going to be fun. When I was appointed chair of the advertising department and PR department at Michigan State University, the Kellogg Foundation funded a unit to study the impact on advertising on kids. I came to the conclusion almost immediately that food marketing ads were designed and doing a great job at getting kids to demand more and eat more sugar-laced foods. These foods lead to obesity. We all know that. Obesity leads to diabetes, and diabetes leads to early death. If that ain't child abuse, what is? I said. And I immediately got appointed to a task force of the Center for Disease Control, and then I went to the NIH for more funding. Paradigm shifting is a dangerous business. This guy, how about this guy? He expressed a theory that the earth revolved around the sun. The church said he was wrong, and he was burned at the stake. Dangerous business? How about this guy, William Smith, an 1800 London geologist observing fossils in canals he was digging across England, said that the biblical conclusion that the earth was formed in 6 days, 6,000 years ago, was preposterous. His fellow scientists drummed him out of the London Geological Society, and he ended up in debtor's prison. Or how about this guy, Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis, who in 1840 or so recommended that physicians wash their hands in bleach before they deliver babies or do surgery in his maternity ward, and that dropped the death rate in his maternity ward dramatically, almost immediately. His fellow physicians were insulted at his suggestion that dirty hands were killing their patients. He ended up dying in a mental institution. Paradigm shifting, dangerous business. How about these guys? Dr. Robert Anda, CDC epidemiologist, and Dr. Vince Felitti compared medical records with the reports of childhood experiences of 17,000 HMO patients, and they proved that childhood trauma not only leads to emotional and mental illness in adulthood, that made sense, but it also leads to physical illness like heart disease, lung disease, and various cancers. While they haven't been burned at the stake, the medical community has been predictably slow in embracing them, despite over 15 years of growing evidence. This finding has been well replicated in well over 100 studies over the past 15 years. There are 10 categories of ACEs that have been identified. More on this at 12:45 in room 230, for those of you who are interested. I did come out of advertising. Roughly half the United States population reports having had at least one adverse childhood experience. The more ACEs you have, the more likely your mental and physical health will be affected. There's a lot of data coming out showing how trauma is linked to changes in brain structure. It's easy to see how this can affect lifetime health. And research shows how toxic stress may be producing chemicals in the body that are tied to heart, kidney, liver, and lung disease, especially in the undeveloped or underdeveloped organs of children. The effects of toxic stress are very powerful, but they're not absolute. Not everyone who experiences horrendous childhood trauma is damaged in adulthood. Researchers are busy trying to find out how people become resilient, and my colleague Maureen Holliker will address this also at 12:45 in room 230. Now, about half the United States have used ACEs questions since about 2008 or 2009 in their regular CDC statewide health assessments. Michigan joined the ACE testing program in 2013, and although the numbers have not been released officially yet by the Department of Public Health, our numbers are going to look pretty much the same. I've seen them. You can see here more than a quarter of all Michigan adults grew up in a home with substance abuse, and 10% of our children grew up with having been sexually abused. It's shocking. It's national. We've heard this before. 13 or 14% women. 1 in 4 Michiganders with 4 or more ACEs reported that they had mental health issues for half of the previous month. The good news is 3/4 report that they have not had mental health issues. 4 out of every 10 Michiganders with 4 or more ACEs have been diagnosed with depression. With all this human suffering, all these increased health care costs, what do we do with this information? First, in order to join the growing movement on ACEs, we have to understand, and the public has to understand, it is as a major public health crisis, resulting, as the Center for Disease Control says, in early death. Let's start with the state's foster children and imagine that there's a better way than subjecting them to the constant pulling and tugging from one home to another. SOS Children's Villages provides one such model, perhaps. They're in 133 countries. In those countries, children can be assured of a more stable childhood in the company of caring adults. Maybe we should rethink the current trend to try to reunite all children with their natural families. And maybe there is a better alternative in some cases for at-risk children. This might not be popular, but it might be a better paradigm for some children. Maybe we should rethink adjudication. Judge Robert Russell in Buffalo in 2009 recognized that more could be done for veterans suffering from PTSD. So he created a new court docket that would focus exclusively on justice-involved veterans. As of 2014, by the way, there are more than 200 such veteran dockets across the United States. Maybe we should consider this model for dealing with abuse and neglect cases, helping the public understand childhood trauma is a public health crisis and not a criminal one, and speeding up the process where kids can get help. Blue Cross, one of my former employers, realized the significance of making sure that hospitals gave aspirin at discharge to all heart patients because this was proven to save lives, and it did. Maybe maternity reimbursement should require hospitals to give basic ACEs information before discharging women from maternity wards. You know, no aspirin, less pay. No ACEs training, less reimbursement by insurance companies to those hospitals. Here's another shift. It's going to be kind of controversial, but I think the ability for a child to become resistant to the effects of traumatic circumstances may come from their ability to recognize when they are being exposed to trauma and also be encouraged to talk about it and to address adults in a position to help. There's a national movement on ACEs underway. Spend some time Googling the subject and then begin to use your voice to talk about it. Once people understand ACEs and the reality of ACEs, maybe they will want to join the movement themselves. And as Governor Romney and I think FDR before him said, if not now, when? And if not, who us? But in any case, don't give up. That's not Governor Romney, by the way. Never give up. In 1952, this man did something that is rather dramatic and affected a lot of lives. The National Institute of Health had given up trying to build a device that could keep heart and lungs going once a heart was taken offline for repair. So open heart surgery was impossible in 1952. People with requiring valves or other surgeries simply died. Charles Pa Kettering, retired head of General Motors, heard that the NIH had given up on this, and so he put a small group of General Motors engineers on the job. A year later, the world's first open heart surgery was conducted at Detroit's Harper Hospital using a device that looked an awful lot like a miniature Cadillac V8 engine. He wasn't accepting the old paradigm. He saved thousands and thousands of lives. You can see this, by the way, this first heart pump at the Smithsonian and in the lobby of Harper Hospital. He made 2 of those. Never give up. Never give up. Defeating polio, which was the country's #1 health crisis in the 1940s and 1950s, required two things. The epidemic had to be recognized. The general public needed to be engaged. That's where March of Dimes came from. That's where Jonas Salk's funding came from. That's what cured polio. Let's not give up on the #1 epidemic of our time, preventable childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences. Thank you for your attention.